really says, it's a clarification, that I'm only trying to change 4 words. And I'm here to tell you it is not a supplement. It is a redrafting of the definition of loading bursts. It introduces a whole new definition for loading bursts, which is not needed. The Anson PUD says that for a term that is not defined within the PUD, Whitestown's Unified Development Ordinance definitions apply. That means the Whitestown Unified Development Ordinance definitions for loading bursts are applicable. Those apply throughout Whitestown, and I am at a loss as to why definitions that apply throughout all of Whitestown should not be applicable to our neighborhood. So I do not believe that amending the ordinance in the way that's been requested is appropriate, and I think it's discriminatory because for us out there it says loading bursts are different than for all of you located within somewhere else within Whitestown. I also believe it is the definition as proposed is not what a loading berth is. You can call a heliport an airport landing field, but that doesn't mean an airplane can land on a heliport. You can call a loading berth the side of a building, but I challenge you to park any truck for loading and unloading on the side of that building. Communities, municipalities, Boone County, Whitestown, Carmel, which is another one of your council's clients, all define loading berths as the spaces where trucks park. The dimensions may differ. Some say 60 feet, some say 45 feet, by whatever. But nobody that I've been able to find in Indiana thinks that a loading berth is the side of a building, as opposed to what the Whitestown Unified Development Ordinance recognizes, that it is a parking space to which trucks pull in, they park, they're loaded and unloaded. So I beg to differ with Mr. Tully that this is a supplement to the existing ordinance, because it is no way, shape, or form equivalent to the parking space that the ordinance now defines. I also believe Mr. Tully has rewritten history in describing to you all the various approvals, and that we, the neighbors, sat back until this building was almost constructed. You know better by virtue of the emails that we submitted in the other Plan Commission cause. We weren't given any notice of the 2014 Plan Commission action. We weren't given any notice of those hearings or the TAC committee, or that the application had even been filed. But in the summer, last summer, when that pad began to be rolled out and the dimensions of that pad got closer and closer to our homes, we went to Lauren and said, how far is this going to be from our home? Because it looks like they cannot possibly park trucks between that building and the protected residential area and not be within the 600 feet where they're prohibited. They didn't have a permit to go vertical when we went to the planning director. That permit was issued after we raised the question. When we met with Lauren, instead of it being so, quote, crystal clear as to whether these loading berths were where they were required or not, Lauren drew a picture for us. And she showed the side of the building and said, I can't tell so far from the filing whether they are pulling the trucks inside the building or whether they are parking out here in this area. If they're parking out here, and she drew a square next to the building where it turns out the loading berths are located, if they are parking out here, they will be in violation of the PUD. Now, I don't know what transpired after that conference until she issued her letter determination. But I would say it is not crystal clear, and that it belongs with the courts at this point to decide what the Anson PUD does say or not say. While Mr. Tully may feel like everybody's agreed, I went to 6 months of meetings on the Anson PUD in 2004. We went line by line through that PUD, and I believe that I know equally well what that PUD is supposed to say with respect to loading berths, which was why my husband and I approached Lauren before anything went vertical, before any improvement location permit was issued. Also, Mr. Tully didn't mention it, but they are requesting this amendment to be retroactive. That's very unusual. They need it to be retroactive because I would submit the PUD is not so crystal clear, and they're not interested in waiting for the court to make its determination. But at this point, we, along with our neighbors, having come to the Whitestown Planning Department before all this started, have invested a lot of time, effort. Over the years, we have remodeled, we put additions onto our homes based on what that PUD says. And if it is certainly in your prerogative to change it prospectively, but please, we believe it would be arbitrary and capricious and would violate the vested rights we have up until this point to make it retroactive. Equally important is that this amendment does not comport with good zoning and land use principles. At the prior Plan Commission meeting, I went through the development of this PUD language, that within the 600 feet north of the protected residential area, there can be no big boxes. Thus, it was not envisioned that the most egregious outdoor use associated with a big box could be within that 600 feet. They limited the height of the buildings north of us within the 600 air-foot area to no more than 35 feet. Said lights out at 9 on signage. We did all sorts of things because the Anson PUD came to our neighborhood. We wanted to be good neighbors and to not obstruct that development, so we made agreements. And we're asking that our neighbors abide by those agreements, and that it is not good zoning practice to say, well, a big box cannot be located within the 600-foot area, but you can put your trailer, your semi-trucks in there. That frustrates the whole intent of that, and it does run contrary to the current definition in Whitestown's Unified Development Plan for a loading berth. It may be 4 words in the trailer staging definition, but the 4 words change it from not within 600 feet of the protected residential area to a building that is not within 600 feet of the protected residential area. So for these reasons, I want you to know that we did everything we knew to do to try and get someone's attention before this building went vertical that this isn't right. But doing a retroactive amendment that changes the whole definition of loading berth for us to be different than everyone else in Whitestown is also not right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I do I do believe they have not shown the threshold criteria for being before the Plan Commission tonight on ownership.
Thank you. Becky Roberts.
Good evening. My name is Becky Roberts, and I live at 5317 East, 450 South, Whitestown. And I'm here to ask you to veto the request from Duke to change the wording of the PUD ordinance. I feel that this is a necessary request, as Duke Browning, in their letter to Ms. Bailey on March 27th, stated that the definition and meaning of such terms in the I-65 PUD ordinance are clear and unambiguous. And in February, the Whitestown Zoning Board found them to be in compliance with the current PUD. I am really tired of coming here and talking. I would not be addressing you if years ago Duke and Browning had followed through with their offers to purchase our property, as I would not be living in the middle of warehouses. So why am I here? I'm here because I'm concerned that Duke does not do what they promise, and when they want to change something, they just say, well, we'll just change it. It appears that they're not afraid of changing the rules in midstream. They did that to me when they dropped the option on my property. They did that when they placed these large warehouses in front of our houses rather than the smaller buildings that they had agreed to. Now they want to change the PUD. The PUD was developed in good faith with Duke Browning and the neighbors. And it was at the beginning of the building process, and it was developed with the residents who are, many of them, now affected by this. I feel if you make the changes they are requesting, you are starting a new precedence. There was a reason why the PUD was written the way it was, and it should not be changed. If you allow Duke to change the wording of the PUD every time they want to deviate from a plan or make sure the wording reads in their favor, you may as well throw the PUD in the trash, as we residents would have nothing to protect us as we continue to watch our biggest investment of our lives depreciate before our eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lee Emmerich.
My name is Lee Emmerich. I live at 5361 East, 450 South, and I'm one of the three properties that are directly related to the, or to be affected by the warehouses that are across the pond and berm from us. And really this boils down to, and it's going to just be repeated over and over, it boils down to a simple definition. We didn't think this definition was going to be such an issue, and we're talking about it for the third or fourth time tonight. This definition, by all regards, does not need to be different than our neighbors to the north of us, Lebanon, our neighbors to the east of us with Fishers and Carmel. This definition has been widely accepted by bigger towns and cities than us. And for some reason, this definition not only needs to be changed by Duke Browning, it needs to be changed in their favor. And their simple request to ask for this change is unprecedented, that they own a fraction of the percent of the property that they're trying to change this rule for. And they're trying to change the pure definition of loading berths altogether. I don't think this is a decision that you guys should have to face. I don't think that it's an authority of the council to have to redefine what a loading berth is. I owned a semi-truck company. We were over-the-road transportation. My company's name was Overland Transportation. Owned it for 3 years, and I had 30 semi-trucks that traveled coast to coast. And our job at the end of the day was to get our trailer to the dock of our customer. And in no way, shape, and form could we get a trailer within the 6 inches that they're trying to call this loading berth on the facade of a wall. If they wanted the footage, the 600-foot number, to be 600 foot exactly with no loading berth considered, it would be the foundation of the warehouse. Loading berth would have nothing to do with this at all. By the mere fact that loading berths are mentioned in the PUD, therefore, by definition, there is a property value to a loading berth. And I've driven many trucks, I've owned many trucks, I've never had a truck shorter than 45 feet. We see this definition through Webster, through any company that builds loading docks. They have to account for the space that these trailers go in. And that is why loading berths are mentioned by name. They're not mentioned by the foundation of the building. Therefore, there has to be an account for the space that it takes. And to say that it's on the facade of the building and that it's a mere inches for the bumper on the loading berth is absurd. Furthermore, there are several other issues, but if you wanted to know the pure intent of what the PUD was there for, you would need to go back to 2004 and sit on those meetings. And the only person in this room that I'm aware of that was a part of the original intent of the PUD are the Drakes. And they were there to protect them and to protect Duke and to have a homogeneous relationship that we can all work together on. And the fact that it's not being upheld a decade later, it's futile to figure out what you could do in writing to prevent things like this to happen, because money and persuasion seem to change definitions all the time in their favor. So I would like to go back to the original PUD definition in 2004, and I would like to just have you guys understand the intent of the law and the intent of what the PUD is there for, and understand exactly what the intent was. And these intents can't change based on financial incentives. Thank you.
Tom Drake.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tom Drake, and I live at 4995 East, 450 South, Whitestown. And I want to say, on behalf of the Drakes, that we are not against development or Duke or Anson or the PUD. I mean, this is not why we're here. As I shared before, I was one of the founding directors of the Boone County Economic Development Corporation. I understand the value of this and all the tax benefits and all that. So we're not here because of that. We're here because of the PUD and how it was written, and again has been said repeatedly that my wife was a part of that. And its original intent was to have a development that worked for the neighbors around the development. And that's why it's written. And there were protections written in there for us. I mean, like, if you read it, I know that we keep back to these bursts, but this is what's important. Is why was it there? The definition is clear. It's all the other counties around, and your own definition of what a loading berth is. They've tried to, that's what they want you to do, is change the definition so they can get this through, and so the lawsuit will be dead. And I'm asking you guys not to change it. Let someone read it and spend some time looking at it. And so the definition is critical to this whole thing. And secondly, if you were us, what would you have done differently? Tell me, what would you have done differently? We set in on months to help this develop. We're a good neighbor. We're not objecting to anything they're doing around us. We haven't brought up any problems with them until this came up. And we, in no way, want to be standing here tonight talking to you about this. The minute we found out that there was a problem, we were never notified. We're not policemen. We don't run around policing Duke, like what are they doing, what are the count. So when they refer back in 14, well, we didn't know what was going on. We assumed everybody is following the PUD and doing what it says. So we have just been sitting back, assuming everything's going well, being good neighbors. And it wasn't until, as already been explained earlier, it wasn't until this past last fall when it looked like maybe this wasn't, there was an issue here. And so before, and again, hear this, we talk about the buildings up, it's millions of dollars. We went to their council, we went to your planning director and said, wait a minute. We believe there's a serious problem here, a serious problem. But it feels like, I can't say, everybody seems to think that it just, this was all brought to your attention before a wall was up. There was some movement of dirt out there, but they could have stopped it. But now it's all up. It looks like, well, you Drakes, what are you doing? You're terrible people. Guys, we try. What would you have done differently? The minute we're noticed, we write letters, we try to bring it to your attention. We're not angry about it. We're glad it's developed. We want it to happen. But when things happen, now listen, okay, we talked about the bursts. Well, these bursts are 30, the definition is 60 feet. But it makes a lot of difference. We're not talking about 60 feet. We're talking about hundreds of feet difference. Because if those bursts are not in compliance, they have to use on the back side of the building. These bursts are not on the side next to us. So there's a huge difference in terms, listen, noise, traffic, lights. That's why it was all in, so that they couldn't do this. But now they want you to change the definition so they can bring these even closer now than they were. And it's just not right. They can come in here and ask you not only to change it now, to make it retroactive the way it was back in the beginning. As we said, we've remodeled houses. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to live because we believed that this PUD was going to be held up. And you couldn't come in and change it just to make it. So again, I ask you, if you were in our shoes, if your house was where it is, and we're not against the design, but we are against them changing the rules and allowing the buildings to come closer so they can make more noise, more lights, more everything else around us. That's why we're here, and that's the only reason we're here. So I ask you not to change the PUD in the definition of loading bursts. It's clear. It would be making our area in the county different than everybody else and all the other counties too. So that's my request. Thank you for listening.
That's all the requests received. Were there any other requests to speak?
We should allow the petitioner to rebut.
Sure, yes. Look an opportunity to rebut. 5 minutes, is that correct? All right.
Thank you, members of the Plan Commission. We're not changing the rules. Think back about this for a minute. This was presented to the Plan Commission, the Planning Director in 2014, the TAC Committee looked at it, the Planning Director looked at it, this Plan Commission looked at it, then it was looked at by the current Plan Director, and then it was looked at by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And all of them concluded that we didn't change the rules. That's what everybody understood the rules to be that was involved in building this building, getting this building approved, and then having it carefully looked at again after it was already done. So we're not coming in here changing the rules. The notion that we would change the PUD at any time, that PUD, I believe, was passed in 2004. That's 13 years ago. As far as I know, this was the first request for an amendment to that PUD. The notion that we don't own 50% of the property, these two text amendments only apply to loading berths and trailer staging areas in the Interstate Commerce District and in the Commerce District of the Anson PUD, and we own well more than 50% of that. The notion that the definition is clear, apparently it's not. There's a lawsuit over that right now, and we're trying to make it crystal clear. The idea that our definition should match Carmel's and Boone County's and wherever else, that's not the case here, members of the Plan Commission. Our definition says that loading berths are on the facade of the building, and that's what your plan commission looked at, that's what your former planning director looked at, that's what the current planning director looked at, that's what your Board of Zoning Appeals looked at, and it determined that those loading berths and that trailer staging area meet the terms of the Anson PUD. We're just trying to now make it crystal clear. We'll concede that there's some confusion over it. Obviously, we're here tonight. There's a lawsuit over that. But we can end that with adoption of these two proposed text amendments. We can make it crystal clear. We can stop this litigation, and Browning Duke can proceed to develop out Anson in the way that they understood it was to be developed, in the way that the Planning Commission in 2014 understood it could be developed, and the way that the planning director in the 2014 and the planning director today understood it could be developed, and the way that the Board of Zoning Appeals, by unanimous decision, understood it could be developed. So for those reasons, we would respectfully ask that you give favorable consideration to our petition. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission? All right, with that, we do have a staff recommendation to defer. We can entertain a motion.
Lauren, can you read what the updated staff recommendation is again?
Yes. It was that staff recommends that the Planning Commission defer to the review committee to review this amendment thoroughly, for them to give a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So essentially, the review committee would sit down and review the whole PUD, specifically this section, and then give a recommendation to you, which you would return give a recommendation to council for final approval, essentially.
Regarding the definitions
Correct. Yeah.
of just specifically this area, not the, so we're looking at just specifically these areas. These two
Yeah, I mean, the
definitions.
sections, and honestly, I think.
The
it's-
review committee, I mean, is looking specifically at those two
Correct,
definitions.
correct.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
pardon me for interjecting here, but it does seem to me it would be within the committee's jurisdiction to entertain other sorts of changes at the same time if it could possibly bring this to a conclusion that would be workable from the town's standpoint. I mean, ultimately, it's the town council that has to make the final call on whether these amendments should go through. And the committee may want to suggest that some additional things be considered as part of that
Okay.
legislative review.
Okay.
I would so be inclined to do that as well, mainly to give the other commissioners an opportunity to weigh in. The fact that they're not here tonight, I think as important as what this is, we're better off to have the entire commission taking action rather than just being a quorum. So I would so move that we make the recommendation that the review committee take this over and report back.
All right. We have a motion?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. The motion passes.
Mr. President, I've taken the liberty to discuss with some of the interested parties here when might be good dates for that review committee to have a meeting scheduled. And, at least from what I've heard back from some of the parties, April the 25th seems like it might be a good date.
I don't have my calendar with me. Can somebody tell me what day of the week that is?
It's the last week of April, Tuesday.
Or alternatively, April the 26th, which is not quite as good, but would also be workable, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think we need to officially set that, but if we can make that announcement now, then those who are interested
I'm okay with that date.
could check with staff to be sure that that's in fact when the meeting gets scheduled. And as I understand it, would be in the conference room here at the municipal complex. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, is there any other business or announcements? All right, with that, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right, and we will adjourn at 7:37. Thank you.